We've seen the now infamous photograph of the president embracing Chuck Schumer, the Senate minority leader. What have these two individuals said about the purpose of that deal? What is it, or what was it supposed to do?
Well, basically, it was supposed to, number one, lock down disaster funding for the hurricane, and number two, address the debt limit, at least temporarily, so that the government continue to operate and the global economy doesn't collapse. The big debate between Republicans and Democrats is Republicans wanted to extend that debt limit deal past the next election so that it doesn't become a political millstone, whereas Schumer and Pelosi and the Democrats wanted to extend it only until the end of the year, which will give them much more leverage in the negotiations that will be taking place over the next 3 months.
Sahil, what are members of the Republican conference saying about that deal that was struck last week and about the prospects for there being some sort of tax reform here in this calendar year?
David, Republicans don't like this deal at all. There's no secret of that fact. Speaker Ryan, we know, opposed it. Senator McConnell was pretty open about the fact that he opposed it and didn't want to do this. It doesn't help when you're trying to get Republicans and President Trump on the same page overwhelmingly as they need to be to get any kind of tax deal done if they want to do it without Democratic support as they're planning. So this is one more in a series of many obstacles that keep piling up while we have very few details as to what Republican leaders are actually planning to do in terms of specific rates, where they're going to be set, pay-fors, whether it's even going to be temporary or permanent. This does not help, and what it does is, even though the White House has talked about this as something that clears the deck for work on tax reform, it sets up another big deadline on December 8th that right after Thanksgiving, negotiators will have to reconsider how to fund the government, how to avert default, and Democrats are going to want to use that to push some kind of DACA codification. The president might want to do his wall. It's just a recipe for potential chaos before the holidays.
Yes, Sahil, just give us a sense of how clear that deck is. You mentioned a few things there. We've still got CHIP, we've got FAA reauthorization. A lot of big agenda items remain. It's not as if this really opened the doors to a lot of flexibility for the Republicans.
There's CHIP, there's FAA reauthorization, there's flood insurance expiring at the end of this month. It's a hell of a time for that to happen. And Republicans still have to decide what to do about the Affordable Care Act. The Senate has shown it doesn't have the votes for repeal right now. You've got key Republican senators working with Democrats to stabilize these markets in the long, at least in the short and medium term, if not the long term. So no, the deck is not quite clear. It's just a little clearer than it would have been, maybe about 8 legislative days than if they waited till September 30th to get this done.
Josh Green, we saw the president on the South Lawn of the White House today for a moment of silence at the White House. He moved over to the Pentagon, delivered some remarks there. He's given comments that he intends to go to Florida a little bit later this week. What's your sense of the level of engagement he has in the tax reform process here going forward? Of course, remember the speech from a couple weeks back when he said that he was going to be kick-starting this process once again.
I think his level of engagement is not very engaged at all. I've spoken to senior White House officials as well as major Republican donors who have spoken to Trump, and he has left them with the impression that he expects tax reform to be done by November 24th, by Thanksgiving, which I don't think anybody else in Washington believes is going to happen. In talking with people around Trump, he's not engaged with the details of what might be in that plan, although in fairness, a lot of Republicans themselves don't seem to know. So I don't think Trump is very on top of when and how tax reform is likely to happen.
Sahil, I'll go to you lastly here. I just want to ask you about the relationship right now between the Republican leadership in the Congress and the president. Of course, there was a dinner last week between House Speaker Paul Ryan and President Trump. I imagine they were trying to soothe some wounds after that debt deal we've been talking about. Where does that relationship stand right now? How likely is it that we're going to see more cooperation going forward?
It's a rough history between these two. There was no secret of the fact that Speaker Ryan objected to President Trump's candidacy. He held out initially last year in endorsing him, after he had pretty much secured the nomination. Since then, it's been, these two, their relationship has been based on the fact that they need each other. Trump needs Ryan to get a legislative agenda through. Ryan needs Trump to sign his bills. But there's no doubt that the senior partner in this relationship is President Trump, and that became ever clearer with this deal. Speaker Ryan had trashed this deal as a horrible idea of Democrats playing politics just a few hours before Trump agreed to this with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, basically humiliated the speaker in that moment. And the other fascinating thing is that you have House conservatives like Jim Jordan, like Mark Meadows, who don't like this deal, who voted against it, but they don't want to blame the president. The president has star power with their base that they don't want to provoke. So they found a way to instead blame House Republican leadership. Speaker Ryan is in a tough spot.